Hey guys, this is Brian with MMA The Hard Way. After the big welterweight fight we saw with George St. Pierre and Carlos Condit, the division's back in action again, it seems like. I thought that I'd sit down and go through the division in a way no one has ever gone through. You give me 12 and a half minutes, I will give you the entire welterweight division. So check this out.
The UFC is currently comprised of 56, say 57 guys on the roster. Now, only 15 of them currently have fights booked, as of right now. I consider 9 of them to be on the chopping block, in my opinion. You also have 17 welterweights in Strikeforce. Fighters like Marquardt, Misaki, Safadine, Woodley, High, Mulhern, and maybe even Stinson are possible candidates for getting signed next year. The division is held by George St. Pierre, one of the greatest pound-for-pound fighters in the world. The top 6 are made up of Johnny Hendricks, Carlos Condit, Nick Diaz, Martin Kampmann, and Jake Ellenberger. Johnny Hendricks is on a 5-fight win streak. He is the #1 contender. Carlos Condit just finished a grueling war with George St. Pierre. He and George are consequently out on 6-month medical suspension. He is also one of the fighters that's in the over 1,000 strikes attempted club, with so far 1,071 strikes attempted. Rounding out the top 10, we have Damian Maia, Josh Koscheck, John Fitch, and the legend BJ Penn. Nick Diaz is, I consider, number 4. Some people would say he's number 2 or number 3 in the world. He's waiting for a fight, and he is also out, but will be ready to go in February. Now, Martin Kampmann just got knocked out by Johnny Hendricks, but he's still considered number 5. He's on a 2-month suspension and should be ready to go also in February. Now, Jake Ellenberger, his only losses have been to Carlos Condit and Martin Kampmann. He's a top 10 guy, 31 takedowns, and get this, 93% takedown defense. That's some of the highest in the UFC. Jake Ellenberger doesn't currently have a fight booked. Who do you think he should face? I'd like to see him face Martin Kampmann again. Now, Damian Maia started off as a middleweight, but he's been very successful dropping down to welterweight. Damian Maia and John Fitch are due to face each other at UFC 156. That should be pretty epic. In terms of Josh Koscheck, I sort of consider him the gatekeeper for the elite. He doesn't currently have a fight booked. BJ Penn is due to fight Rory McDonald coming up on Fox 5. I call this next group the Tier 2 fighters, starting with number 11, Sahir Bahadurzada. Number 12, Rory McDonald. 13, Mike Pierce, followed by Mike Pyle, and number 15, James Head. Rounding off the top 20, we have Brian Ebersol, number 16, followed by Jay Heron, Dong Young Kim, John Hathaway, and Thiago Alves. Number 11, Sahir, scored a first-round knockout of Paulo Thiago. He's looking good at 15-2 over the last 7 years. He was supposed to be on 149, but you know how that worked out. He's waiting for a fight. Now, Rory McDonald is due to face BJ Penn at UFC on Fox 5. That should be an amazing fight. And then on UFC on FX6, Seth Baczynski gets a big step up in competition, going up against number 13, Mike Pierce. Next, James Head is due to fight Mike Pyle on the TUF finale. Jay Huron had a close comeback fight versus Jake Ellenberger. Has been given Eric Silva as his next opponent at UFC 156. An interesting note about Jay Huron, he is the only top 20 welterweight in the UFC that doesn't have a win inside the octagon. Dong-Hyun Kim is in the middle of the pack. This guy's got 54 takedowns. Brian Ebersol also has a lot of takedowns with 40. John Hathaway's on a 3-fight win streak. We're still waiting to find out who he's going to fight next. Thiago Alves, I think he's due for a win. He's been in the UFC for 7 years. He's also has 1,417 strikes attempted. There aren't that many guys that have over 1,000 strikes attempted in the UFC. And got busted for 420. He's out till July. The next group of fighters are the Tier 3. Most of these guys fight on the undercard. They start with Rick Story, Eric Silva, Dan Hardy, Kyle Noak, and Aaron Simpson. Ranked at number 26, we have Claude Patrick, TJ Wahlberger, Seth Baczynski, and Justin Edwards, and the 58th fighter dropping down from middleweight, Nick Catone. Rick Story doesn't have his next opponent yet. I wouldn't mind seeing him fight Aaron Simpson. Dan Hardy is seeing a resurgence in his career with a 2-fight win streak. We'll probably see him fight in the UFC when they return to England next year. Kyle Noak is famous for knocking out the Spaniard Charlie Brenneman at UFC 152. He was supposed to fight Seth Baczynski on UFC on FX6, but he got injured. Aaron Simpson lost his last fight against Mike Pierce. That guy's got 92 takedowns in the octagon. Claude Patrick is also injured. He was supposed to fight James Head at UFC 149. Dan Miller is now 14-6 and has been having success since dropping down from middleweight. TJ Wahlberger will be facing Nick Catone at the TUF 16 finale. Catone will be making his welterweight debut. As mentioned earlier, Seth Baczynski is now facing Mike Pierce at UFC on FX6. He's on a 6-fight win streak. Justin Edwards is another fighter waiting on a fight. I call the Tier 4 fighters undercard guys that bring it. Fighters like Mike Swick, Paulo Thiago, Sean Pearson, Jay Mills, and Matt Brown make up the top 5 in this group. They're followed by undefeated Gunnar Nelson, Matt Riddle, Josh Neer, Chris Clements, and coming up with a ranking of 40, Ultimate Fighter winner, Amir Sadallah. Mike Swick will be facing off against Matt Brown real soon on UFC on Fox 5. Can you say slugfest? Paulo Thiago is the highest-ranking welterweight that I believe is on the chopping block. He's lost 4 out of his last 5 fights. Sean Pearson is on a 2-fight win streak, and he's waiting for a fight. I'd like to see him fight Edwards. Jay Mills is also waiting for a fight. He's 2-1 in the octagon. Matt Brown is 8-5 over the last 4.5 years in the octagon. Let's see if he tries to take this fight to the ground when he faces Mike Swick. He does have 31 takedowns in the UFC. Gunnar Nelson won his debut fight. He's known for his submissions. Look to see him on the next European card. Matt Riddle is 7-3, having spent his entire career in the UFC. He's got 1,146 strikes attempted. He was also suspended for 420. We'll probably see him next spring. With a ranking of 38, Josh Neer is 6-8 in the octagon. He's on a 2-fight losing streak and boasts 907 attempted strikes in the UFC. I believe he's also on the chopping block. Chris Clements comes in ranked at number 39. He's 1-1 in the UFC. Ultimate Fighter winner Amir Sadallah has a record of 6-4 in the octagon, with an amazing 1,235 attempted strikes. Finally, we have our Tier 5 fighters, prelim guys hungry to make an impact. These are John McGuire, Kenny Robertson, Keith Wisniewski, Lance Benoist, and undefeated Marcelo Guimarães. Also, veteran Dwayne Ludwig, Brock Jardine, Pascal Kraus, Simeon Thornton, and at 50, Stephen Thompson. Rounding out the group, we have Papi Abedi, Mike Stumpf, Sergio Moraes, Bassem Youssef, newcomer Young Kyu Lim, Rene Forte, and David Mitchell. The first 4 guys in this group, in my opinion, are on the chopping block. John McGuire is 2-2 and has lost 2 in a row. Both Kenny Robinson and Keith Wisniewski have yet to win in the UFC, and Lance Benoist is 0-2 since winning his debut fight against Matt Riddle. Marcelo Guimaraes won his debut over Dan Stingy, and is very decorated outside the UFC. With 3 straight losses and a UFC record of 4-5, Dwayne Ludwig is also on the chopping block. Brock Jardine lost his debut fight against Rick Story, but he's 9-2 overall. Pascal Kraus is a popular fighter in Germany. I'm sure we'll see him on the next European card too. Simeon Thornton is also a very popular fighter in Europe. He's 1-1 in the UFC. And then Stephen Thompson comes in with a ranking of 50. He's 1-1 in the octagon. Papi Abedi is also on the chopping block, with a UFC record of 0-2. With a ranking of 52, Mike Stumpf lost his debut fight. He did only have 6 days' notice, though. Sergio Moraes is 1-1 in the UFC, with a submission win over Rene Forte at UFC 153. Bessim Yosef had his first loss in his debut fight against Simeon Thornton. Hyung-Gyu Lim has yet to have his first UFC fight. He's a popular guy in Korea. Rene Forte has been fighting for 6 years. Although he lost his debut fight, he's 7-2 overall. David Mitchell comes in with a ranking of 57. With the UFC record of 0-2, he's also on the chopping block. The jury's still out on who will face George St. Pierre next. Will it be Anderson Silva in a super fight? Will it be Johnny Hendricks? Who knows? Will it be Nick Diaz? It's hard to say right now. One thing we can count on is that the welterweights in the UFC always bring exciting fights.